Ready? What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 37 of Convos on the Pedicab. I'm here with a very good friend of mine, Delta Foxtrot. We're so close. I don't even know his full name. But I'm really excited to have him on. You know, he's a former U.S. Marine. He's done tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, right?
Nah, just got a couple tours to Afghanistan.
So he's been to Afghanistan. And I really wanted to bring him on the show just to really talk about what's going on with the Biden administration and how he feels about, you know, this new presidency adding thousands of troops in Iraq and Syria. And we're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things. GameStop, you know, came up, and we're going to definitely go into that and what that really means. And we're going to talk about, like, you know, our presence abroad and why we're in all these countries and what the end result of it is. So I'm really excited to have you on. So Delta, thanks for coming, and let's talk a little bit.
Well, appreciate you having me.
Of course. So, dude, you were in Afghanistan. And when were you in Afghanistan?
From 2009 to 2010, and then again from early 2011 to late 2011. So we did one of the initial pushes in 2009, finished that, wrapped up, came home, and turned around and went back in 2011.
What made you want to join? Like, what made you want to do this?
I come from a military family. All the men in my family are military. Most of them are officers, pilots. The only people that didn't join the military were my siblings. I have 3 brothers that didn't go. I was the only one that went. I was the only one that wasn't Air Force or Navy and wasn't a pilot. So I got a lot of shit for that. But
let me ask you another question. Knowing what you know now, right, with all the information that's available to you on social media, would you have made that decision? Like, if you went back into a time machine, knowing what you know now, would you have gone into, and would you have, if you were back in 2009 with all the info that you had right now, would you have enlisted and gone to war again?
Oh, absolutely.
What?
I would have kept the same career path. I probably would have stayed in longer just to help with the changing of the leadership, because the biggest issue we see nowadays is this failed leadership. At one point, they kind of pushed all the combat vets out and tried to remake all the branches, and it just, now you have all these guys in higher up positions that don't really have the experience they need to lead in the proper way that they need to be able to. Sure,
but I feel as though you know, especially with all the alternative media that was really propagated on YouTube and the social media companies, I feel like, you know, after really looking into what we do in foreign countries, I feel like the last thing I'd want to do is join the military, you know, in any capacity, because I'm just dude, me being in Afghanistan or you being in Afghanistan, even though the intentions are super noble, I don't really feel safe by you being in it doesn't make me feel any more or less safer by you being overseas. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally understand that, but I loved my time in the military. I mean, obviously I got out for a reason. I was kind of over everything that I was having to personally deal with and put up with. But I wouldn't change that. I wouldn't take it back.
What was the experience like being a U.S. Marine in Afghanistan during the Obama administration, after we literally, Fox News and George Bush and the Pentagon and, you know, the UN and pretty much everybody lied to get us into these conflicts? What was that experience like?
I mean, it had its pros and cons. Being a Marine in general is interesting. You're kind of like a pit bull that they keep in a kennel, and they just every now and then they come in, they'll poke you with a sharp stick, and every now and then they'll come in and open the cage and tell you to run off.
You just go fuck people up?
Yeah, and go eat something and then come back, and then it process starts over again. But I mean, when we were there, we were building a lot of rapport with the people. That's when we were focusing on the whole hearts and minds thing. So we had some wells built, we had a school or 2 built. Hopefully they're still in, you know, good shape now that we've left them. But what I saw through my eyes, I saw that we did a lot of good.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on what you guys did?
Just mostly that. Like I said, just trying to build with the communities. Every week, every 2 weeks, we'd meet with the tribal elders, try to take care of any issues, find every problem they had and try to help them with the solution, and mostly try to push everything towards their way, so they weren't always coming to us needing something from us. That we were trying to help them be self-sustaining, be able to take care of their own shit within their own community.
Okay.
While also helping them understand that we are a member of their community at the time.
And how do they feel about you guys being there?
I mean, I think in general, a lot of the elders did not have an issue with us being there. There was a lot of guys that we came across that fought the Soviets during the Russian invasion, and they were all about having Americans around them.
Really?
Yeah.
Because during the Russian invasion kind of gave rise to the Taliban, didn't it?
It was, yeah, a lot of the former Mujahideen fighters ended up transitioning over to the Taliban. But, I mean, we trained those guys initially because Mujahideen guys fought with us when they were fighting with the Soviets.
When they're fighting with the Soviets, but then once we left, they just formed the Taliban. Like, how did that whole thing work out?
Just, again, like a weird failure of leadership. Some guys decided to, like, they didn't have handlers anymore, so they decided to branch off, kind of go do their own thing, and that just slowly grew until this entire other entity. And then we just kept giving them money and training them and shit, not paying attention, especially under the Obama administration, and it gave rise to a whole different caliphate and different ideologies.
The Obama administration was still giving money to the Taliban?
Yeah, 100%.
Well, how did that work out? Because I thought that they were literally saying, the whole narrative was you're going into Afghanistan to fight the Taliban.
They were still getting backhanded funding. I mean, these guys are in multiple countries. They have multiple designators under different leaderships. You have the Sunni Taliban and then the Shiite Taliban, and those two don't even like each other. So they'll both be searching for us or trying to interrupt one of our missions and end up running into each other, and then they'll start fighting each other. It's a whole weird organizational setup they have, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it's once we dropped them from training them or working with them, in the 70s and 80s, that's when, like I said, all these other things started popping up. All these other guys were fighting for leadership, and it's almost kind of cult-like. But they were still getting help and training, either not from us, from other countries surrounding, and then all getting pushed in to Iraq and Afghanistan.
So other foreign countries who presumably were our allies were literally on the back end training people in the Taliban?
Pretty sure, 100%. I mean, there's camps in Pakistan. Pretty sure Saudi Arabia is in there. Iran is obviously a big one of them. Not that Iran is really an ally of ours, but we have been on better terms with them recently.
I mean, honestly, when you think about that, though, it kind of makes you wonder, why am I even joining the military? Because ultimately, you're going there to destroy the Taliban, right? That's what they're telling you.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're going into these foreign countries to destroy a hostile entity that oppresses its own people. But then the people that send you there to do that are also funding this oppressive entity.
Right.
So what's the point?
I mean, it's war, man. It's politics.
I know,
but at the same time, that's what I was saying. I appreciated it because when we're there, your mission will constantly shift. And ours shifted from just going on hunter-kill missions to trying to help the local populace. So we're trying to help them with the wells, help them build schools, help them with, build their markets up if they needed anything like that. And then working with the local forces as well to bring them in so they can become part of their own community and learn how to police their own and take care of each other.
So you guys seem like you were pretty welcome there then, right?
Yeah, we did. I rarely had any interference or saw any pushback from local populace. At least when I was there. I had tribal elders and local farmers that would bring me tea and fruit and vegetables and shit like that all the time.
What was the environment there like? What was it like in Afghanistan? Had you not been there, just objectively, what was it like?
For the locals?
Yeah. I
mean, where we were pretty out in a rural area, so a lot of them didn't even have electricity, much less anything else. So they're pretty tame and calm, easygoing people. Obviously, didn't have a lot going for them. They're either praying or they're doing chores, or they're asleep or they're eating.
You think they're happy with their lives?
Seems like it. I mean, you can't be upset about what you don't know. If you don't know, you don't know it. They don't know what the internet is. They don't know about Instagram. They don't know what to do with any of that shit. So
they're not taking selfies?
Yeah.
They're not posting those stories. They're not on Robinhood right now trading GameStop?
Although I think, if more Taliban had access to iPhones, maybe more of them would be dumb and take selfies next to IEDs and be able to geolocate where that is.
I could definitely see some of these. I could definitely see that happening, dude. Oh my God.
They take their little
story, yeah.
They take their little gang photos in front of the wrong compound and be like, I know where that is. See you in a minute, bro.
Yeah, I can definitely see that actually happening. Because they paint this narrative, right, that you're going into these countries to free these people from oppression and injustice and all this stuff, right? But Were these people really that oppressed when you went in there?
I mean, they were having issues just because obviously there had been before where I was, especially like in Sangin Valley, before the Americans were there, the Brits were there, and before the Brits were there, a decade prior, that's where the Soviets were. So there was always issues. Their main concern when we got there is like there were so many IEDs and just homemade explosives placed throughout all their roadways and all their markets and everything. People were terrified to go ride their bike or drive around certain areas. So we would go through and clear all that out for them and then kind of rebuild the road. And we weren't exactly like pouring concrete for them, but we would bring in gravel trucks and try to level the road out, make sure it's cleared out, and try to put some type of protection layer on it so if somebody came in to mess with it, the locals would know and be able to come tell us so we could then go back out there and re-clear it.
That's cool. And then okay, no, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I mean, like I said, we'd have meetings with elders, and elders would come in and be like, we are concerned because our kids are getting killed because our kids are going out to the fields to play. They're hitting these IEDs that these guys put out that are meant for y'all. Like, y'all are supposed to be out there getting these bombs, not our children.
And so it was the Taliban that was putting IEDs out in the roads?
Yeah.
And they were doing it because, different forces from different countries were occupying that land.
Yeah. So they're like, it wasn't like...
generations, and they're just like, man, fuck these guys.
Yeah. A lot of times, too, is like people think it's like we're in an area and the Taliban in that area are fighting us because they don't want us in that area. It's like these guys are fighters from foreign nations. They don't give a fuck about the locals there. So they're coming in. They're not always just trying to come after us. If they can't bully the local population into giving them cash for their crops and like growing poppy and shit for them, then they'll start doing it to antagonize and bully and try to terrify the local populace.
So I kind of do understand now when you talk about the poppy seeds why the U.S. is paying the Taliban on the back end.
Yeah.
Because when these guys are growing those types of plants, I mean, you can make a lot of stuff with poppy seeds.
Yeah, well, if you look at it...
And then we had an opioid epidemic and a whole bunch of shit.
And if you look at it, it's because the increase of the opioids and opium and heroin and everything that was coming into the U.S. or around the world, the increase went up like 90% since the beginning of the GWAT.
Yeah, and us being in these countries, it almost like serves as a buffer for this stuff to continue happening.
Yeah. Hopefully now that I think we're seeing a lot of lawsuits, a lot of companies are having to apologize for the opioid crisis that we've been dealing with the last decade.
Well, I mean, a lot of doctors were just prescribing like these pain pills and these opioid-like pills to like athletes or people who just got hurt in small towns or in rural areas.
Dude,
and,
you saw it a lot in the veteran community. There was a lot of veterans that were just getting prescribed like a lot of this shit, and it was causing a lot of addiction problems. Especially with guys, you get a guy that like lost a limb or something, he's already going to be depressed for a while and have some issues with PTSD and like I said, depression, anxiety, all kinds of shit. So giving him a bunch of opioids is not going to be the healthiest thing for him. It's obviously one that's correlation versus causation, but they're known to create addictions. And you got this guy that's going to have this kind of issue anyways. So now you're going to make him, he's going to have trouble sleeping. He's addicted to opioids. It's like, that's why the suicide rate's so high. And a lot of times because these guys are on several medications and they're all opioids. It's kind of ridiculous. So I'm glad they're finally doing something about it, but they need to keep pushing for that.
I think it's pretty messed up that this was like flourishing under the Obama administration. And while this is happening, you're getting all this woke lecturing from people.
Right.
You know what I mean? About how great of a guy like Obama was and how if you like criticize him, you're a racist or like...
I mean, he was a poster boy. He was like the first of his kind, but he was, I think he kind of went with it. I think he did a lot of good. I'm not a fan of everything he did.
I think he did some good. I think that like a lot of nonviolent drug offenders got out of jail because of him. Yeah. Which is good. I think that the economy, did it recover very well under Obama? I mean... The stock market kind of recovered. Like, it set the stage for what Trump did. Yeah. It set the stage for Trump's economy. And say what you want about Trump, it was the best. He presided over probably arguably the best economy in our history, at least from a modern standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, it only took a businessman actually coming to office to do that, right?
Yeah, I think it could also. I think like a lot of his incompetence, kind of played a role in that because everything like he just deregulated everything and probably spent more time like watching Fox News and Newsmax and tweeting a bunch of bullshit than actually being president. And I think because of that, like a lot of these corporations were able to kind of do whatever the hell they wanted, and it just drove up stock prices.
Yeah, I'm sure he gave his. I don't know how his press secretary didn't have a stroke.
Dude, his press secretary is amazing.
She's fucking.
Like
boss.
if you compare her to like Jen Psaki or whatever.
Oh, is that the new one?
Yeah.
The let me circle back.
Let me circle back. Like.
I've never seen somebody so obsessed with circles.
Dude, she is I honestly kind of feel a little bad for her. Because, like, look at what you're working with. Like,
Yeah, I don't know if she's just underqualified or if she just kind of gets thrown to the wolves and they don't tell her what kind of questions she's going to be hit with or what's going on with
Well,
that.
I think that
she always looks like she's unprepared.
she just looks, like, nervous and frazzled. Like, she's like, I could definitely see that lady having a meltdown within the next month because of these questions. And then Twitter's going to be sympathetic to her. And then you're going to see all this, like, sympathy from, like, the mainstream media talking about how people are being mean and bullying Psaki.
Right.
Meanwhile,
don't
like,
criticize her, you'll get banned on Twitter.
Yeah. Meanwhile, like, Kayleigh McEnany was getting heat left and right, and she was just handling shit like a boss.
Right.
I think that, like, Jen Psaki and Kayleigh McEnany are literally two different breeds because it cannot be easy. I don't think it can be easy to be the press secretary for either of those people.
Yeah, I mean, I would never want to be a press secretary for any politician.
Especially those people. And Jen Psaki was, like, the assistant press secretary under Obama.
Really?
Yeah, so she has experience doing a lot of this stuff. I think this has to do with just her being out of touch. I think, like, her and these guys are just really out of touch. Like, even when they're talking about, like, the GameStop stuff, like, she didn't really have an answer, or she dismissed the whole GameStop thing. It's like, well, our main focus is getting Americans back to work in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm like, you're really missing out on how transformative this GameStop revolution really is.
Right. What was it? Didn't AOC has been talking about it, hadn't she?
She brought it up. Well,
I think her and Ted Cruz were going back and forth.
No, they were agreeing with each other, and then AOC literally said, "What did AOC?"
She accused
She's like, "Well, you
him
tried to get me killed at the Capitol.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to talk." I'm like, "Dude,
You
you guys are
attempted to
literally
murder me."
agreeing with each other on the same thing that benefits the American people. Like, stop being so petty and solve the problem now. Worry about this other stuff later."
Yeah, she literally kind of threw a tantrum. She was like, "Wait a minute, I don't like this guy, and he just agreed with me. Not acceptable."
Not acceptable. Yeah, it's like you're almost the person who's expediting division. But
Yeah,
hey,
actually, I think he actually had his attorney serve her with a lawsuit if she doesn't take that back. It's like, you told me I'm an attempted murderer. It's
good.
like,
I hope he did.
I'm
I'm glad he did that. I mean, that's the right thing to do. It's unfortunate that it gets to that point, right? I mean, ultimately, this week has showed us that we don't really live in a capitalist economy.
Yeah. At least not a true one, like it should be.
Yeah,
But I also kind of laughed that she even said anything about it and brought it up. Because, like, for somebody that's, like, mostly socialist, you just pointed out something that was very, very American capitalist style. Even with, like, the obvious corruption that's behind it right now.
I think the reason she was saying these points is because she understands that Wall Street's playing a rigged game, and it kind of proves her point. Like, hey, look how rigged this game is. And y'all talk about capitalism and free markets. Like, they're not even letting the free market operate when the hedge funds get upset.
Who was I'm blanking on his name, but there was an older gentleman that's obviously one of the operators of the hedge funds, came up and he was calling it an attack on the rich. He was like, "Oh, they're trying to eat us alive, or like eat the rich, or
there
something."
There was Leon. Why can't I remember his last name?
Yeah,
Leon,
but you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, there was his name. What?
Cooperman?
Leon Cooperman. Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, Leon Cooperman was, and then there was some other guy said this could be a foreign attack or whatever. I'm like, you guys are so full of it, dude. Like, you literally just lost. Like, you got played. Like, you got beat by a bunch of amateurs.
You got punked by Reddit.
And that's fine. You know what? Like, if this is a rigged game, and if these people beat you at your own game fair and square, like, you can't cry about it. Like, you lost. Like, take it like a man, dude. Take it on the chin. And at the end of the day, man, these funds have so much money that they can just fight back and start. Like, GameStop is so ridiculously inflated.
Yeah.
These guys can just start shorting. They can make all their profits back by shorting GameStop now anyway.
What was the other
dude.
one? They started going after other companies because they were like, "Fuck it, we're gonna do it again."
Nokia. I bought $100 worth of Nokia.
For
the cause.
Didn't somebody,
just for the cause, I bought $100 worth of Nokia.
Somebody was talking about the people that bought Blockbuster, the owners of what was former Blockbuster. They were going to try to do the same thing with them.
Just pump Blockbuster back up.
There was one more. Was it Motorola?
No. There's no BlackBerry.
BlackBerry.
BlackBerry. They did BlackBerry. Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. I wish they would bring a BlackBerry back. Those phones are dope.
Dude, I think that this is like the new revolution now. Like, you talk about like what happened with BLM. Like, I get why all this stuff happened, but the real revolution, dude, the real revolution is going to be a financial revolution.
Yeah.
It's going to be a revolution that requires no bloodshed, and eventually, you know, the more you start financially educating people, dude, you're going to see collections of disenfranchised college students or college graduates or high school students just start shorting big companies and bankrupting them. Like, a collection of kids could bring Fortune 500 companies to their knees because of the information that's available to them. And I think that that's what these people are way more scared of versus the quote unquote violent rhetoric they listen to on
Yeah.
Twitter. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, it's also there should be like mandatory personal finance classes that you get in high school and college.
but this is
There's, like-
I think that this Reddit stuff shows why they're not doing it.
Yeah.
Because they know if they start offering that, everything that they built, their house of cards will literally crumble
Right.
within like a 5-10 year period. That house of cards will get burnt to the ground if they start financially educating a bunch of people. Like, look what happened on Reddit with GameStop. Imagine, like, you start teaching comprehensive financial literacy in the hood. and a bunch of these guys who feel like so disenfranchised, they're pissed off about how they've been treated, right? Like left and by the government, by corporate America, by everybody. Imagine what they would start doing to some of these companies. Imagine what these guys could start doing to like the U.S. Treasury Department. Like, just imagine what could happen. Like, this could literally implode our entire system can implode, not from communism or like a socialist revolution, but from a capitalist revolution will implode the system.
Yeah. And I can just imagine these guys imagine trolling the Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve would be done after all this. Like, the Federal Reserve would literally be done because if you look at how much money they print, they were talking about just buying silver and sending silver to the moon because of how much money we're printing out and how undervalued a currency silver is.
Sending silver to the moon.
To the moon.
And that's that's
Like,
that's
just
that's our secret
pump-
reserve up there.
You just pumping the stock up that high. It's just like we're sending this shit to the moon. Like, there's been
gotcha.
talk about people sending silver to the moon.
That's ridiculous. I think that's why everybody right now is just like, fuck, I'm just gonna start buying gold.
I think Bitcoin's probably a better reserve. I think like the cryptocurrency is probably a better reserve.
Yeah, what's the other one? I was reading about one
Dodge.
last night.
There was
yeah,
Dogecoin,
the Dogecoin.
the Dogecoin that has no value at all, and everyone's just buying it. I think it's
Yeah.
great, man. Like, I think this is like literally.
But
how
then
you're
it
gonna
started
get
off
people.
at like it was less.
It was
than
like a penny a coin, and now it's
yeah.
like
Now
it
they're
got
trying
up
to go
to
up to
$7
$1.
cents, and they're trying to bring it to $1. But
Yeah,
now the platforms are literally restricting trading on it so that it doesn't go to
But
$1.
still, that's impressive because I think in like 10 or 11 hours it went up like 730%.
Yeah, it went up to about 8 cents a coin. This made up currency that doesn't exist.
Right. This joke that somebody made and they made it real. That dude that made that is probably like, oh shit.
This is hilarious. Dude, the Wall Street
not
Bets,
prepared for this.
Dude, the Wall Street Bets guy on Twitter is a hero. Like, he's an American hero. Like, he's becoming one of the most famous people in the like that Wall Street Bets meme.
I think I've seen the one.
That that little image.
Hang on, let me look this dude up.
Dude, look at this. Hold the line. That's the new hashtag is hold the line. Hold the line, dude. The line was held. Wall Street Bets chairman. He has 853,000 followers.
This guy.
This guy, dude, this guy is the hero that we. This guy needs to be the president of the United States. Look at this. GameStop united the country at a time when nothing else could. He's right.
Nice.
He's right. We're all united on this.
That's hilarious.
This movement is just getting started, and it is getting started. This will get started.
This is gonna be fun. The next couple weeks of this is just gonna be entertaining in itself.
This is going to.
I'm excited to see what we do next. What we
Dude.
got after next.
A lot of people are going to lose a lot of money and make a lot of money. A lot of fortunes are really going to start changing hands. It's not going to be consistent. It's not going to be like a forever thing, though. You know what I mean? Because like these big companies, they have cash, they have liquidity, they have products. Like Apple isn't going to fucking go under because of this. You know, Microsoft isn't going to go under. Facebook's not going to go under because they're going to literally be using these platforms to talk about this stuff.
Right.
And then a whole bunch of these guys, like a whole bunch of these new millionaires, because there's a lot of new millionaires were created from this.
Right.
This could actually be really good for our economy, and this could revive a lot of small businesses because now all of a sudden you have a lot of new millionaires that are going to start creating jobs and pumping money back into the economy. This is like actually a really good transformative thing that's happening.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just curious to see what the next move is.
Who knows? You know, honestly, they might start making certain rules and regulations about like what is allowed on financial trading platforms, and the SEC might start doing that, and that could also create a little bit of a stock market depression because everyone's just like, you know, we're just going to pull out. We're not going to even invest.
Right.
If they start doing
It's like one of
then-
those things. It's like who regulates or who oversees the people that are creating the regulations? Because how do we know they're not just going to make a bunch of rules that help them and screw us over?
Yeah, honestly, this is going to be this could also be something that could lead to the stock market just getting abolished because now all of a sudden they're like, oh, these regular people can't make real money. Well, that's not allowed. We're not allowing this. This is
Right.
you know, our scepter of elitism is being threatened right now as we speak. We need to abolish it, and then they'll say it's because they are like, you know, aspiring or ascribing to like socialist causes, and they're doing it to reduce income inequality. And I'm like, no, dude, you're literally adding income inequality by doing this
Yeah.
shit. Get out of here.
You literally told me I can't make money for myself because it takes away from you.
Exactly. Only the ultra rich can. I had an argument on my pedicab with this couple, and they saw my mask and they're like, nice mask, and I'm like, yeah, there's a virus going on, just want to keep you safe,
Right.
and they're like, well, it's the wrong part of your face, and I'm just like, hey, the real virus is communism. And they're like, no, the real virus is capitalism. I'm like, no, dude, you don't understand. Runaway capitalism, like what you're seeing right now, literally leads to communism because all these ultra wealthy people, like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Bill Gateses, the Soroses, the Bezoses, all these people, they would love nothing more than to get rid of anybody competing against them. And the best way to do that is to create a communist country where you control all these big mega corporations control the supply and distribution of resources, and they undercut all competition, and then they literally hog and monopolize the wealth for generations.
Yeah, I would have loved to talk to that couple.
Yeah, I got out there. Yeah, and this one girl was like, "Yo, man, the people in these countries, they love their government." I'm like, yeah, that's because they go to death camps. They go to special camps if they speak out against the government. Of course, they love.
I've never met somebody that fully believed in communism that wasn't like a pretty well off, mostly wealthy Caucasian American. I've yet to meet anybody that's a minority. It's like, yeah, socialism, communism.
No, I know a few. The one dude I talked to was actually black, and he had his white girlfriend and stuff like that.
Interesting.
And they were nice.
You're a little uncultured if you think I've talked to people before. This is actually when I was in college. It's part of some debate class, but this kid was talking about the pros and cons of Venezuela, and I was like, "What fucking pros?"
Yeah, I don't know. Have you been to Venezuela?
No, but I met plenty of people that have been from there. I served with the guy that was from Venezuela. The only reason he was even serving is so he could get his American citizenship, so he would never have to go back. But he used to talk about it all the time. I was like, that does not sound like a fun place.
No. I have a buddy at 10th Planet who was from Venezuela.
Does he have anything good to say?
Nothing good to say. Nothing good to say.
I don't understand how people can use it. But look at Venezuela. It's a beautiful country. They're thriving. It's like,
no, they're really not.
What?
But at the same time, though, that's not even the best example because a lot of times when popularly elected officials emerge in these countries, the U.S. will cut off aid if it doesn't coincide with their corporate agenda.
Okay.
These countries could also be struggling. These countries could also be struggling because the U.S. is so powerful that they cut off resources to that country because it goes against the corporatocracy. So there is that too. There is something like that that's got to be considered as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You ever read the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman?
I have not.
You should read it. It's by this guy John Perkins, who basically his job, he was contracted out by these firms, and these firms were connected with the World Bank and the IMF and whatnot, and they would go into these third world countries and convince the leaders to install oil pipelines and wells and large infrastructure projects, and they would basically loan them money to do that, and then they would be paying them constant interest, and the interest would go up and up and up and up and up, and by installing these projects that would create economic growth, all it would really do was put these people in perpetual debt where they were indebted to the IMF and the World Bank and the U.S. government and these imperialist oligarchical forces.
Basically trick them into make themselves a slave.
Yeah, and then if they said no, they would just create they would create a false flag insurgency. They would engineer a populist uprising to get rid of that.
And, blow up the pipeline
to get rid of that leader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you
know what I mean?
Yeah, we've done that. I don't know how many times.
And then if that wouldn't work, they would just start a war. They would just go to war with those. They would just go to war with those people.
I think I can't think of his name, but there's a former CIA operative that wrote a couple books that talks about that, just the false flag insurgency thing, just coming in just to kind of trick the populace into getting rid of a leader. I mean, we tried doing that with what's his name in not Turkey.
Saddam?
Not Saddam.
Libya. Gaddafi.
We tried doing it with that, and we had failed several times.
Yeah, and then Benghazi. Yo, did you know any people who went to Benghazi?
What's that?
Did you know any people who were in Benghazi when all that shit happened?
Associates. I don't know. I don't have any friends that were there at the time, but I know people that worked with.
What did they tell you?
About what? As far
Benghazi,
as
about that whole fucking experience and everything.
just that it was fucking weird over there, and that what they were doing is they started drawing down the security presence, and then that's when that ambassador, Chris, I forget his last name. I'm terrible with names today. He started asking for, saying they were getting these warnings. They were being told they were going to get attacked. They were having threats issued to them. So he requested several times to get the security beef back up, but they only kept a handful of contractors and a handful of like Marine Corps security guards and what have you. And they just kept a react force, kind of nearby, but they still would have been a few hours out. And then when that whole thing went down, that's why they were so ill prepared. And that's why it created such the fucking mess it did. There was no way to even save the ambassador's life and get him out of there.
Yeah, didn't Gaddafi didn't Libya have like their own like independent currency and stuff too while this was happening?
Yeah.
So they were literally deviating from the dollar, from the Federal Reserve System. Like they were becoming like their own independent.
And their claim is people look at it and be like, oh, he was becoming like a tyrant, like his own supreme dictator, where even his face was on the money and da 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 da. And it's like, okay, I get that, but also at the same time, he was making it may have been part of his narcissism as a leader and as a dictator, but also it's like he was kind of making his whole country like self-sustaining and free, and so he could tell the rest of the world to fuck off. He was going to do whatever he wanted. Now, with the way he treated his people, different story.
I don't think he did. Yeah, he didn't have a very good track record.
Yeah,
of how
there was
he treated
definitely
his people.
multiple human rights violations there, but he just wasn't being a puppet, wasn't doing what he was told.
But he was trying to create a self-sustaining country.
Yeah. For the most part.
It's kind of similar to like Donald Trump a little bit.
Kind of. I mean,
he
wasn't trying to put himself on like $1 million bill or anything.
No, yeah. And honestly, like we have way more checks and balances.
That I wish we used a little bit more often.
Yeah, in the U.S. that kind of prevented Trump from being a dictator if that's what he wanted to do. If anything, I probably think Biden's more of a dictator with 40 executive orders in like less than a month than Trump ever was or will be.
And some of those, God, I hate some of those so much.
What do you think about his decision to put all these troops back in the Middle East?
I don't understand that. I mean, it was just interesting that one of the last things Trump did was like pull between, like I think it was 2,500 or 3,000 troops back out, and that's Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany, other parts of Europe, and now Biden immediately is talking about sending thousands back, and it's like, but for what? Like I understand the purpose of us being in Europe. That might just be a thing to kind of keep Russia and China and like Iran on its toes. But it's like we never properly had an end state in place for like Iraq and Afghanistan, and there's really no point to continue to keep troops there when we can just watch the surrounding areas. It got bad as soon as it did. They started calling it like our forever wars. It's like we've been in Iraq multiple times for well over like decades now, both Iraq and Afghanistan. Like shit, there's kids that weren't even 18 that are serving now that are over in Iraq that were like maybe 10 years old when I was in.
Yeah.
Like,
well, you have like
ridiculous.
father and son.
Like,
it's like my dad fought in 2003 and now I'm fighting. You know, like they have shit like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, there's guys that are serving now that weren't even alive when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
Like the fuck.
That's crazy.
War's not supposed to last that long.
It's not supposed to last that long.
So that's interesting. We'll see. I'm more curious to see what he's going to do as far as Russia, who obviously, I mean, maybe we should, I'll call Hunter Biden and ask him some questions about that one. The other thing is China, because I'm really weird with him in China. I don't like how close they are, how cool they're being. There's a lot of sketchy stuff there, especially with what he's doing with our energy. I understand the whole switching over to green. Like, I can't be against
No, I get that, yeah.
But it's like, even by like we were talking about the Keystone Pipeline.
Yeah, I haven't researched it as much as I would like to.
There's so many pros and cons to that, but my biggest thing is like the way he's switching over our energy so quickly. Is it's getting rid of jobs that only would have been. Those aren't forever jobs anymore.
Those are like temp contract jobs. Most of those jobs are like, oh, you took away 11,000 jobs. I'm like, most of those are like temp jobs. Yeah. Most of them they pay well, but they are temp. They're temps.
My biggest thing is just I understand projects like that. But it's like when you immediately put a stop to all these, you're kind of making us instead of having us be self-reliant on our energy needs, now we have to go outside the country. And the first people he's going to go to is China. So now China's going to own part of our infrastructure, own part of our energy infrastructure.
Wait, he's going to China? I thought we were going into the Middle East to get the oil, though.
Well, I mean, a lot of the oil's still coming from the Middle East, yeah. But China wants to be like part of it in our energy infrastructure. And I remember I was looking up was reading more about this. I think it was like last night actually, but we're going to end up being owned more by China than anybody else. I mean, we kind of already are. We're in debt to them as is. But there's just a lot of weird, sketchy shit like that. The whole thing with like the fucking leader of China giving Biden so much praise and talking to him, it just seems kind of interesting.
It's very odd.
There was something. I wrote something about this.
I mean, the Keystone Pipeline was pretty controversial though for like since its inception, it's been super controversial. And they're also using like eminent domain to go over people's farmlands, and it's pretty environmentally destructive with how they're doing with how they do these pipelines. And they got the Permian pipeline that's going through Central Texas. That if you pulled the plug on that, I would be super happy with, because it's going through like the San Marcos and the Blanco River, right?
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. That's why it's like, there's give and takes to everything.
I mean, I get it, but there's no
pipe that's 100% safe. That's not gonna.
And honestly, we should be gearing towards and using more green energy, and we could be using more fuel efficient vehicles, and we could be utilizing battery and solar power and wind and all that stuff to power our homes, and we should be using those resources more often. We've had electric vehicles all over the country, like 100 years ago. If you ever see pictures of 100 years ago, you had all the buses were electric. You had electric cars. You had like electric scooters. Like that stuff is not new. Like this has been around for over a century. So we can definitely we don't need oil and gas to get around the way that people say that.
There's plenty of other resources that we could build on to try to rely on. I think it's just the effect that it would have on these specific economies that we've spent so many decades and has so much money, so much infrastructure based on.
Well, there's a lot of money like Exxon and BP and
yeah.
Halliburton.
Well, it's kind of like the same thing. It's if we try to do away with smoking, it's like we're just going to get rid of this billion-dollar industry with all these jobs because we're going to outlaw cigarettes now.
And these billion-dollar companies also invest in other smaller companies, and they invest in like Apple, and they invest in like the tech companies, and you get rid of these giant industries. It creates a domino effect where it starts affecting your retirement, because I'm like, oh shit, now this billion-dollar industry that we're not giving subsidies to, or that's not being helped in any capacity, they can't like contribute to the 401ks and whatnot. Then your 401k gets lower, and a lot of stuff like will wind up happening. That's not necessarily. I'm not articulating this as well as I should, but it basically can create a ripple effect of people's investments in retirement and stuff really disintegrating, because a lot of these institutions and a lot of these large companies, if they're not able to be prosperous, that affects your retirement. That affects everything. And then
another thing too is it would be really interesting to watch if they were to pull the plug completely on like gas and oil. Exactly how long it would take before like the last switch was turned off, before those two giant entities were just.
I don't think you could pull the plug on gas and oil though, but I do think that to pull the plug
completely over to.
But to pull the plug on this pipeline, you're not even you signed so many executive orders, right? But I don't think anything really has been geared directly towards COVID relief yet. Which is the most important thing you should be signing an executive order on, is giving us checks and COVID relief. Maybe this stuff on Robinhood wouldn't have happened if they did that.
Maybe. That's the other thing too. Wasn't somebody bitching? It's like the government just gave you all a bunch of money and you just turned around and tried to fuck over a bunch of hedge funds. And I was like, how is that a statement anybody would put out and make? I forget who put
What's wrong with that statement? That sounds like a great statement.
Well, no, it's just funny. It's like, how are you going to bitch at me because I took the tax money you already owed me and put it back into my own personal investments?
Yeah, you've literally all said, hey, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You have opportunities everywhere. Invest the money you have, and you could really grow. And they did it, and they're like, oh, not like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, come on, man, that's ridiculous. But
it's like, now you're mad I found my way to get my hand in your pocket, and now you're upset. Okay.
Yeah, you don't want me. You talk about wealth redistribution. This is redistributing a lot of wealth. This is great. What's happening, and you're also creating more taxable income for people. Now, all of a sudden, the people who are made all this money on GameStop, Dogecoin, or whatever bullshit that they bought. That's taxable money that could be used to finance green energy, schools, improving roads, public transportation, drug rehab services, homeless services. All that money could be used to fund a lot of really great social things, but instead everyone's just yelling about the SEC or trying to restrict trading. And I'm like, dude, you're literally stopping the propagation of wealth from happening, and you're hindering the efficiency of services as a result of that. It's a mess what they're doing.
The funniest thing too is the fact that a lot of this, just a few people started doing this, and then they caught on to Reddit, and they went after Reddit, and then obviously that blew up, and then you have all these pages, these basic, normal, like, comical meme pages that started putting out all these Wall Street memes, and all it did was make more people that don't even know what they're really doing or investing in run out and start buying more of the stock, buying more of the Dogecoin, going after the cryptocurrency.
Hey, before we wrap up, how did you feel about the whole storming the Capitol thing?
Like professional opinion or like honest opinion?
Both.
Honest opinion?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty close to fucking treason.
What those MAGA guys did?
Yeah, just because if you think about it, they were trying to compare it to the revolution. Like, the revolution lasted a few years, and we were fighting against a tyrannical king that was trying to overtax us and make our lives hell. Like, we weren't in 2020. We went from that to in 2021. We went after a democratically elected official. That we didn't go after a tyrant. That was a democratically elected official, and that we were butthurt about. And so that's like storming the Capitol is pretty close to being, a traitor.
It is, but here's the other fact of it too, right? And what if these neoliberal Democrats did collude with like Dominion vote, like some of these voting machines and whatnot? And when you look at what like these Democratic governors and mayors did with how they locked down their economies and their cities for no reason and destroyed small business, literally destroyed their own cities to prevent someone from being reelected. And then you had these riots over the summer that really felt like an insurgency when people were yelling "Death to America" on the street.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And they were silent.
Yeah,
they were silent in that. And then they encourage all this mail-in voting stuff. But then Jeff Bezos says, "Hey, you can't vote for our policy decisions by mail because of fraud." You could see a lot of these people could literally be thinking that we don't have fair and just elections, and that's why we're there.
Yeah. I mean, I get that, and also if you look at pictures from, I think it was like March of last year, like most of D.C. was on fire, and there was a lot more, there was billions of dollars worth of damage. More people have died in those than this one little, insurrection or whatever they want to call it.
In May, right? May, not March.
May, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So
that's just... I mean, yes, people were injured, unfortunately.
It's unfortunate. Like, I wouldn't do that shit, right? I wouldn't go and storm the Capitol or do anything. But what I did notice is that, like...
Yeah, because, like, long term, I'm not going to accomplish anything by jumping over a gate and kicking a door in.
Exactly. There's got to be purpose.
And the amount of money that the FBI is dumping into funding to go after every one of these idiots that took a fucking maskless selfie. The one time in your life you should, like, wear a mask for a full day is when you're storming a federal building and nobody in there wanted to have a mask on. It's like, bro, come on now. I get it. I don't like masks either, but if you're going to,
Hey, if you're going to commit a felony, that's what masks are for.
Yeah, maybe you should wear
and that literally was a felony, and it was a pretty lame revolution because I'm like, dude, if you're really going to have 1776, you should have been there for days.
Yeah.
But what I did notice is that there are probably a lot of, like, ex-military that really don't want to defend this Biden administration. There are a lot of, I'm sure, I could be wrong. There's a lot of people in the military, a lot of former military.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing
that
the
really
Capitol...
hate the Biden administration, and if something like this were to happen, like this show, like there were so many like ex-cops, and there were a lot of ex-soldiers, and they were taking the bullets away. And on January 20th, they're taking the bullets away from the guns of National Guardsmen because they were worried about them being Trump supporters. Like, this is like so ripe for an actual revolution. It's fucking crazy.
I have yet to see a picture of anybody that was part of the National Guard that was in D.C. that had a magazine in their rifle. I don't think any of them had ammo.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right?
It's hilarious.
But it's weird.
But the other weird thing, too, is I was talking to somebody about this the other day, is like this thing with the Capitol, and I think about 2004, 2005, there was 200-plus Iraq vets that stormed Washington, stormed the Capitol to protest the continuation of the war, and they arrested like 200-plus people. They went in there and just arrested all of them, all these like former combat veterans. And then somehow this happened, and all these like average Joe civilian guys just were able to open up and climb inside one of the most defended places in the continental U.S. It's like that's kind of seems a little sketchy to me.
Yeah, it's almost like it was being set up to like further take rights away from people and create Patriot Act 2.0. Yeah. But at the end of the day, man, it's like you're an ex-soldier who went and fought for our country, and you were defending the institutions that we have, right? Mm-hmm. And you're agreeing with me on this discussion. There's a lot of soldiers that are agreeing with this. So like, the fact that we're all like everyone's like coming through to these unanimous consensuses about how fucked up our government is and how fucked up like, this corporatocracy is, like, and you had a shit ton of like cops that were in civilian clothes that fucking stormed this, And it's like you literally took your fucking uniform off to go against the cops because
Yeah.
you're that pissed about the system. Like, this is our government's got to be careful. Like, they need to, like, they need to start listening to the American people, because we've never been this ripe for an actual revolution within our country. And nobody wants that, dude. No one wants that. Nobody wants an actual conflict. Like, we just all want to live our lives, run our small businesses, make intelligent investments, breathe clean air, drink clean water, have positive relationships with one another. That's all we want. And we just want our government officials to, like, be empathetic and facilitate that. And it's so important that this happens, because nobody wants chaos. I don't want that shit.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think it's just like we just need to, get back to kind of riding the government a little bit harder, keep, like hold our officials more accountable for everything they're doing, and remind them that voting season's always coming up. That's why I'm a big proponent on a lot of the legislation people are trying to push right now to limit terms for, like, the Senate and Congress.
I agree with that. We need to do that, yeah.
Absolutely. There's no reason you should be able to have a lifelong term for anything when the president, I mean, thank God the fucking presidency.
You should not be allowed to make any investments or buy stocks or do anything financially while you're in office.
Yeah, like, I don't understand how none of that is, like, conflict of interest or counts as insider trading or is just completely illegal.
Hey, Nancy Pelosi just bought a whole bunch of shares of Tesla, like, early this month. So
I heard about that. Yeah, at like $500 a share. And
now
Biden's switching over to the.
Although at the end of the day, man, like, hey, buying into green energy companies is probably a good thing to start buying into.
Yeah.
But anyway, Delta, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an all-new episode of Convos on the Pedicab. How can we get a hold of you, man?
I mean, Instagram's probably the easiest way to go.
Cool. And what's your IG handle?
It's _Delta_Foxtrot.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Thank you.